Hi, this is Jared Krause, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And in this episode, I'm speaking with Tyler Bishop, who is the CMO of Ezoic.com. Now, before Tyler started working with Ezoic, he had started, grew, and built up his own online business, scaled it to sell it, made a good portion of money with his co-founders, and then started working with some pretty big businesses in America, helping them scale and build their teams as well, one of which being Microsoft. Eventually, Tyler got asked to join Ezoic by the co-founders. He got linked up with them and has loved it ever since. Now, in this episode, it's jam-packed with such great value, and we talk about how and why Ezoic started. And in fact, the co-founders even started out buying 400 websites with $6 million, which I think is a feat alone. Now, we also talk about how Ezoic isn't just an advertising platform. Instead, how it helps publishers make more money from the ads they already have on their sites. And we talk about how and why they actually do that. Now, we also dive into the most valuable tool Ezoic has, and it's their ad tester tool, and how you can actually go away and get a 30-day trial for it. Now, this is such a valuable episode. So for anybody that's looking to either buy a content website and or has a content website and wants to scale it, using ads combined with Ezoic is such a great way to go. And I feel you're going to get so much from this episode. So enjoy. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Buying Online Business podcast. Today we get to speak to Tyler, like I said in the intro. Tyler from Ezoic, thank you so much for jumping on. We've had a lot of chats and I'm pretty excited to dig into this one.
Yeah, Jared, I'm looking forward to it. We were chatting a little bit before the podcast and we decided, we were getting into things a little too deep already. So we figured we had to jump on here and just have this conversation in front of the people.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much value alone in what we were just saying. So it was worth just stopping there and hitting the record buttons. And wasn't that actually the first time we spoke? The second time we spoke, you told me a bit about Ezoic and how it actually started. And I knew what Ezoic did as a tool, as a platform, and how it helps publishers so greatly. I didn't really know how it started. And when you elaborated on that, like a lot of the dots sort of linked up, and it really helped me to understand why Ezoic is built the way it is and how it was actually created. So I'd love, if you may, is go back to the grassroots and tell how like this actually started with the founder and what he was doing previously and why he decided, this is actually really important.
Yeah, I think your audience will be able to relate to part of the story because I think, ever since I started working with Ezoic, which I was here since the early days and helped us grow this thing, just the model that we used to build this business, I think a lot of people that are probably listening to this will go, hey, wait a minute, now that's an idea. And the reason is because as far as I know, we're one of the first companies to ever do it this way. And our founder, Dwayne LaFleur, I'll toot his horn a little bit because he'd never do it for himself. He's not somebody that's going to be doing many interviews, but he's one of the smartest people I've ever had a chance to work with. And he was the revolutionary genius behind the idea of exchanging our real currency for digital currency. And I use genius kind of in quotes because it's not, if you think about all the different kind of like crazy ideas that, different people might come up with, the idea of like, hey, maybe we could get people to give us real money for, play money or, monopoly money, essentially, it'd be great. But you have to have something of value there. And I think now when we live in a world where you have things like Fortnite and other games like that, it's not as far-fetched, but at the time you had games like Farmville on things like Facebook. So before Facebook kind of cannibalized their own app marketplace, they allowed basically all developers, third parties to create apps. And a lot of game developers were basically monetizing their apps with advertising and also selling their digital currency to buy like tractors and stuff. And so one of the things that Dwayne learned after he had that business acquired, so he actually was the one it was the first ad network ever created for Facebook. So he built that and it was acquired by a business called Ad Knowledge. And while working with Ad Knowledge, transitioned the business, one of the game developers, it's called Mafia Wars. I think Zynga actually was the publisher, which Zynga's still around making mobile games. They were on a call and Dwayne was supposed to be giving them some advice on basically their ad stack, where the ad demand was coming from. And when he got on the game itself to play it, he realized like this game is really, really hard to play. I don't know how it's gotten as popular as it's gotten. It's basically unusable, he thought. So he's going through on this conference call with them all the different ad demand changes and stuff like that. And at that time, and it's still this way in publishing now, good changes in, finding one ad network and working, kind of under the old kind of waterfall method, or even just looking at the header bidding model now, like swapping in and out different ad partners and things like that. A good uptick in, or a good result would be like a 4 or 5% uplift in revenue or something like that. And so he was giving that advice. And then he said, hey, before we get off the call, one of the things that we used to always advise publishers on was the layout of their games, because the layout seemed to make a huge difference in UX, and UX is directly tied to what advertisers pay for ad space. So you guys should make these handful of changes on the layout or test them. So a couple hours go by, and then all of a sudden they have these screens up inside of their office, and the intraday revenue, which is showing how much money the game developers are pulling in, all of a sudden just 3x, like in the middle of the day. And so they called the guys up immediately, and they were like, what did you do? And they said, well, we just implemented all the layout changes that Dwayne had suggested. And that was sort of Dwayne's aha moment that he had sort of kind of discovered earlier, but it was the validation of a lot of the things that he had discovered, which is basically that it's not the ad demand that's as important. And we have an entire industry focused on what we largely consider to be the wrong problem. And what we should really be asking is, how do we make the decisions about where the ads even go, what should be on the page? And realistically, every user is going to be different, because advertisers treat every single visitor differently. And so Dwayne was like, this is great. He was a website investor himself. Another gentleman that he met at Ad Knowledge by the name of John Cole, based out of the UK. He knew John from John had his ad network acquired by the same large business. They'd met there. Dwayne said, hey, I know this guy's got a portfolio of websites. I'm building this AI to automatically alter ad layouts and things like that, so that basically we can extract more money from investments without having to do anything, not having to hire ad ops people or do any work. And so he contacted John, was like, hey, I got this idea. Would you want to participate? So they both take the portfolio of their websites, they start buying sites, and they realize pretty quickly the technology works great. And so they said, hey, let's not use any more of our money. And they went out to Balderton Capital and they said, hey, give us $6 million. We're going to basically validate this technology. And if it works great, we're going to actually make it publicly available. And so they did. They got $6 million and they went out and they were able to buy close to 400 websites, which is, I mean, for people that are listening, is not easy, right? Like
for $6 million as well. Like they've done well to get some websites. 400 of them for $6 million. That's, to find that many sites that are half decent, they've done well.
We actually built tools back then that we used to find sites to buy, and we still use them today in a couple different capacities internally. But just to give you an idea, the undertaking, Dwayne is sort of a developer by trade, so we build a lot of things like that internally. And so they went out, and within 6 to 8 months of acquiring all those sites, they basically gotten the $6 million back. And so we joke with Balderton, even to this day, we've reused that money quite a few times. And it's true, because we still own and operate quite a few of those sites. A lot of them have sort of become whipping boys or experiment sites, and so they don't get the traffic they once used to, but the principle was the same. So that basically funded the business. And from that moment on, we were largely a profitable company from our early days, and we've been in business for close to 10 years now. And one of the biggest takeaways from that is this idea of essentially going out, buying sites, and then using the money that they generate from that moment on is basically a way to bootstrap a business. And that's what we were able to do. And one of the first questions that we always get, or I always get from my friends when I tell this story, is like, why didn't you guys just keep buying websites, and just like into infinity? And realistically, the goal was not to be a media business. There's a lot of media conglomerates, and they sort of always lose their way at some point, buying and acquiring sites. There's this like appetite to always go bigger. But beyond that, it's a thirsty business, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, it takes up your capital so quickly. It really does. And then you've got so much more management on top of that. and, you guys trying to manage these sites and then perfect your tool and all that sort of stuff. I think it's so good, that story, that people are buying sites and they're like, okay, cool, it's awesome. And they don't really understand why those sites are really making money, or why people are hanging around on those sites longer, especially we're talking about content sites. And it all comes back to Wayne seeing that that game obviously didn't have a very good experience. Like, it was hard to use. And then you could see with some tweaks and changes, it being more user friendly, then, more people are going to hang out and play that game longer. And it's the same when people are consuming content on your website, is that when people go away and they see, all right, it's easy navigation, the content's good, they've got not just like one half decent post, but they've got multiple ones that want to keep people on the page, then their eyeballs are going to be in front of the advertisements so much longer. And, it just opens up the window of opportunity to click on those ads so greatly, doesn't it?
And that's the thing. And I think that this is one of the major disconnects in this area. And it's basically, I used to do presentations, conferences on this topic, but it's, how does internet advertising really work? And realistically, user experience is inexplicably tied to website revenue in three different ways, and in three ways that probably most even publishers could not explain to you in technical detail. And the first is basically the way that you're describing, the actual user's experience itself. And this is like number one, why machines are better than humans at this. And it's not that machines make better decisions necessarily. It's that in this scenario, machines could make almost as good of a decision, but can make it thousands of times. And it would take so much manpower to make that decision. And that is essentially, if you and I both go to a website, I'm coming from the United States, you're coming from the other side of the world, our websites are going to basically potentially provide us with completely different experiences relative to ourselves. So my site, I maybe like a hamburger menu on mobile, maybe you like a menu with a button that says menu, or maybe an ad at the top of the page doesn't bother me here in the evening in California, but over in Australia, maybe in the morning you're in a rush, the ad at the top of the page is super annoying. And so you bounce and I don't. So from an ad ops standpoint, we want the user session to be as long as possible in many cases, because visiting one pages versus two, you can actually show somebody more ads over the course of 2 pages than you could in one. And that's just one way of looking at the revenue, which I'll get to the other ways. But the thing about that is, that's an easy optimization. You can just write a rule and you say, well, people in the United States on mobile, you show them top of page ad, especially in the evening. And there's a lot, like you could test evening, morning for everything, but then you could write a rule and say in Australia in the morning, don't show that top of page ad, right? Yeah. And then you prevent that bounce and you maybe extend the user session. And that's one way that you extend the revenue. The other 2 ways are equally influenced by machines. One is that time on site, the user's experience in of itself, is influencing how advertisers bid over time. So a good example of that is, if I'm an advertiser and I show that top of page ad, if you're constantly bouncing or scrolling past it or very annoyed by it, the viewability, the CTR, and probably the overall performance, if they're a CPA advertiser or something like that, meaning like they tell Google or someone like, I just need this many customers for $200, is going to start adjusting the bids for that ad placement based on the fact that it's just not doing well, whether depending on how they're buying, whether it's impression or clicks or campaign performance. And so we can basically mitigate that like bid dilution by ensuring that you don't see that placement that you're annoyed by or potentially going to basically make devalued over time, but you do show it to me in the United States, right? Yeah, so over time, advertisers will adjust their bids based on that same experience that we're trying to optimize around. Go ahead.
Let's get on to, before we get onto the last method, which is super important because you got those first 2 and the third one is going to come. But I just want to really bust the myth that a lot of people have around Ezoic, and that it's, you just sign up with Ezoic and you're going to put ads on your site. So a lot of people will come to you because they want to put ads on the site, but you can do that with Google ads or with you're not a media buying company. And that's what a lot of people perceive, is that you're helping people put ads on their site, which you are, but you're helping them more so put them in a better position on your site that helps you, get a higher ROI. Like, you can go away and look at all the blogs that I've written about how to increase your revenue and the ones that you guys have done as well. But a lot of people have the perceptions like, if I'm going to put ads on my site, I'll just want to use Ezoic, and they may just put ads on the site, but they don't know the full depth of why to use Ezoic. And just with the tool itself, that the main focus is user experience. And that's what these 3 tools are, right? So what was that third one?
So it kind of speaks to, I think, the larger point that you're making, which is, Ezoic in of itself, and it kind of ties together even the origin story, is we really view so many different aspects of digital publishing. Like you said, people might just want to put ads on their site. They know they want to monetize it and they want to extract the maximum value possible while not ruining the visitor's experience, right? And so if you're not an ad ops professional, meaning like everything about this space, you know how to go out and do deals with all the ad networks and implement things like header bidding, stuff, all kinds of different words that I can probably throw out there that people may or may not be familiar with. But ultimately, to be an expert in something like that, and then also be an expert in SEO and content and all that other stuff, is very difficult. So what we saw as a major risk to publishers, and not only that, something that we really disliked about the space in general for a long time, was how much of it was just black box and outsourcing or handing things off. And so we wanted to create a platform that made it easy for publishers to do something like advanced ad ops and advanced monetization for their site. And we didn't think that needed to be restrictive artificially in any way, because realistically, we want to be a software like something like Adobe. And I think it's a complicated thing to work on, thousands and thousands of sites. I liken it often to, we're going through the coronavirus pandemic right now. We'd have a vaccine right now if it wasn't for the fact that vaccines are hard. When you test them, you've got to go through a lot of rigorous testing, because you might roll it out 10,000 people and they're all fine, but then you roll it out to a population of 100,000 and then you might find that there's some really, really major side effects or something like that. And it's the same with building technology for the web. Might work great on 5,000 sites, but what happens when you have 100,000? So I think that our onboarding process can definitely better, that we educate publishers about what we do can be better. But ultimately, what we want to be able to provide is a platform that allows publishers to access all the ad networks all in one place, connect any existing ad networks that they have, and then basically implement something as easy as just drag and drop if they want to be able to automated ad serving on their site in a way that leverages artificial intelligence for testing and takes advantage of those first 2 principles that I mentioned. And even the third one, which is basically, I mentioned before, advertisers treat every visitor differently. And to this day, right now, everything in digital publishing as it relates to ad monetization still works the way that it worked back when we were printing newspapers. And what I mean is, whenever I print a newspaper, if I print the New York Times and it goes out tomorrow morning, everybody's going to see the same ad placements because it's stuck. We can't show different versions to different people because it's in print. And for some reason, we've kept that in digital, and it doesn't have to be that way. And the reality is, supply and demand changes a lot.
And user experience, or like you said, in Australia, I might not like the ad on that part of the site, and it ruffles my feathers.
Yes.
Whereas somewhere else is like, that's what we want. I want it in plain sight.
And that's the thing, is the user is just one side of the equation, and the other side is the advertiser itself. And that means, a good example, and I love this one because it's so weird. Sweden, for example, the most popular ad size in Sweden is a 260 by 350. I've been in advertising for a long time. I've never run a 260 by 350 until now. And I just do it because I want it for this example. And the reality is the most popular ad size in most places is a 300 by 250. It's a little square ad. It shows up on mobile and on desktop. So you have tons of advertisers bidding on it. So when a visitor comes to your site and you want to show an ad and content that's not disruptive, a 300 by 250 is a really good choice if you're an ad ops person, except if that visitor is in Sweden. Because in Sweden, more advertisers bid on that 250 by 360. So you might say, like, why can't I just put ads in fixed locations with Ezoic? Why is it always having to change the locations around and things like that? And it's because Ezoic is not only optimizing for the user experience and optimizing for ad rates over time, it's also adjusting supply and demand to meet the maximum value for bidders for different locations. So that in content location for the visitor in Sweden, you're going to get a higher bid if you show a 250 by 360 versus a 300 by 250. So being able to have the flexibility to change that is really great. So you go, okay, that's an easy rule. But think about when you think about traffic source, geolocation, time of day, device type, it starts getting really deep in all the different decisions you have to make. And like I said before, I mean, people, it's not a matter of whether or not they could make a better or worse decision. It's that they can't make those decisions because there's just too many of them.
Yeah, we have
And
like 200 megabits or 200, thoughts coming into our brain every second. Like it's really hard. And that's why a lot of people have, shopper's fatigue or decision fatigue. What would be really cool if it's not even available yet is that, such a level of tracking each user to their interests and even changing the ads to suit their interests best, which could cause a higher click-through rate as well. I'm not sure if that even exists, but that could be definitely something.
So that's where the industry has been focused for a decade, is like, if I can just show the right ad to the right user. And realistically,
Really
Google would
hard.
love for you to think that that's the case, but that's actually not at all what Ezoic does. That's the ad network's job.
Yeah.
Their job is ad targeting. And that's where, you hear people, talk about the death of the cookie and things like that. But realistically, there's a decent amount of studies out there that show contextual targeting is very effective as well. There'll be some type of replacement for cookies moving into the future. People complain all the time about like platforms listening to their microphones and things like that. And the thing that I always point out to people is like, now, no one is able to prove that. So imagine now that an advertiser is able to target you so well that you believe that they're listening to your microphone. And that's really how good ad targeting has gotten in a lot of respects. And anytime I see somebody that's irrelevant ad, one of the first things I think is that's an advertiser that's running a really poor campaign, because I've seen a lot.
Me too.
In my early career, I ran some, unfortunately.
Me too.
Anybody that's done it has gotten burned at some point. And realistically, that's what's happening a lot of times. You see irrelevant ad is you have either a situation where there's no other bidders taking place because the value of that visitor is very low. Oftentimes publishers will see low value ads on their own sites because basically they're so cookied into their own sites. They may visit their own site and see, 1,000 page views a day. Advertisers don't want to bid on that visitor. They're never clicking on ads. They're never buying nothing. And they drop out of bidding on those sites. And so they'll see, basically the only people that are left. And then the other situation is just somebody that's running a bad campaign and is spending way too much, and it's, circumventing all the other advertisers.
I've definitely put out bad campaigns, and I still do. Like, I'm always learning. I'm a human being. And what I feel about, we're mainly talking about bigger ad agencies, and we've got Facebook and Google. And what I feel about Facebook is good, and I use Facebook a lot. I also use Google, but I find Google has far better targeting because, more often than not, if I see a YouTube ad or a Google ad, that ad is targeting me before I even know that I need that product or service. But I do need it. It's coming up in the future, or like before I even thought about it, it'll give me that. And I think what's really cool about Google, most people will be using Google, and then hopefully after this podcast using Ezoic to optimize those ads through Google Ads, is that I feel Google really can see the next logical step for each human on what they're going to need in their journey. And I think that's that really does help using a good ad network as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, they're a really dominant player in the space. It's why they're facing such great antitrust legislation in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
And it's because they have a very dominant place inside of our ecosystem right now, especially as it relates, well, I mean, all advertising. But when we look at display, the telltale sign of an ad network is they serve two purposes. They sell ad space, and then they also buy ad space. So a publisher is essentially selling their ad space. They don't get to pick what people bid, but they can choose what they're willing to sell it for. So I can say, I'm not willing to sell this spot on my site for anything less than a $1 CPM or something like that. And advertisers then are bidding on audiences. So we're already buying and selling different things. And one of the things that happens is an advertiser will then say, well, I want this type of visitor. And if I can get them, Mr. Ad Network, I will pay up to a $3 CPM. And then the bids go out and things happen in what's called a real-time bidding protocol. And what will happen is basically all the bids for that visitor go out across any ad networks participating in that ad location, and they'll basically bid. And a lot of the bids are based on historical data as well. So in different ad exchanges, you'll have historical data that will tell you what previous buyers or previous sellers have sold the ad space for, what they've been bought for, what the campaign performance has looked like, what the CTR has been, things like that. And in the early days of ad networks, you have someone like Google's AdSense, who's pretty much the most dominant single ad network. Well, not pretty much, they are. There's not many single ad networks left that are truly relevant, other than maybe AdSense. Some of the header bidders out there are still fairly relevant, like a Criteo or a Rubicon. And then you have like the native ones like Taboola and Outbrain. Media.net is an alternative that people will turn to every now and then. But realistically, most sophisticated setups are going to include either one or multiple ad exchanges, like Google's ad exchange. So
Yeah.
when you use something like Ezoic, or you outsource ad ops, they're almost always going to make you fill out a Google AdX application. And it's so that you can sit inside of their partner account. And the Google AdX application is so that you can basically serve ads on your site from Google's ad exchange. So almost every relevant ad network, and there's probably some exceptions to this, participate in Google's ad exchange. So you can basically look at it like there were so many ad networks, and they were also, for lack of a better term, not on the up and up in many cases, that an ad exchange was basically a Wall Street trading floor that allowed all the exchanges to basically compete inside of Google's fair playing field. And what would happen is everyone would bid and compete, and then ultimately AdX would serve the winning bid. And because of the nature of Google being so dominant, and realistically, it's you can do without any other ad exchange. If you want to extract the maximum amount of revenue possible programmatically from your website, you basically can't do it without Google's ad exchange. You're going to be operating at a huge deficit. And one of the ways that publishers have tried to create competition on their sites is through header bidding, which is basically a separate auction that occurs in the header of a website. And for a long time, it did a great job at being able to give publishers additional revenue. But Google has changed some of the rules and the way that they price their auctions, and it's made it a lot less relevant. But realistically, Google is very, very dominant in this space. It's really hard, essentially, be a publisher without using AdX. And if you use AdX, you can't use another ad server. So if you even do direct deals, or you do a deal with Reebok directly and you want to serve that on your site, you need an ad server.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you want to use two ad servers, one for your direct deals and one for your programmatic? That's really hard to get them to work together. So you're forced to run your direct deals directly through Google's ad server, because it's the only one that gives you access to AdX. And that's essentially Google creating a monopoly from easily. A monopoly they already had, which is the definition of antitrust. But
we won't get into that. But
I'm not saying it's antitrust. I'm just saying that's the definition of it.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and it does. It's what a lot of people are scared of. But we've talked about, obviously, why Ezoic is important and what your platform actually does. Like, for anybody that owns a content website, user experience is, number one, the better user experience is, then the more you can make from your ads, not just for you as the publisher to make more money for your ads, but because you make more money for the advertiser, then they can pay you more money. Now, with that, there's a few different things that we can do with user experience. And you've got a laundry list of things that you can do with Ezoic. Can we talk about maybe the top 2 to 3, like say the ad tester tool? Like, let's talk about the how and how it works on the platform, just so people can understand, people that either own a content website and are already advertising, and they want to get more from their ads, or people who are listening that are on an affiliate site or are going to buy a site and they want to put ads on their site, but they want to make sure they can get the most revenue possible for where they're putting the ads. What are the top 3 things that you have with Ezoic? Is it the ad tester tool? I know that you talked about the multivariate tool and speed test. There's so many things, but what would be the top 3 and the easiest ones to use, and why?
So the first place to start, especially as it relates to monetization, is probably ad testers. So ad testers basically our flagship monetization product. It's 30 days free that pays for itself. There's an ad funded model so that you never have to pay anything for it. And realistically, it gives you everything that you need to extract the maximum amount of value from your site programmatically. So we use real machine learning. It was the basis of why we started this company in the early days. It's why people gave us money. We raised $33 million in growth funding last year. If you look at the ad tech industry, people don't give money to ad tech anymore. It's largely seen as this commodity marketplace, but we're different because we actually have a proprietary technology. And that technology is basically allowing users to put ad placeholders on their website. So you would pick a page on your website. We have a Chrome extension. You drag and drop potential ad locations, and you can set all kinds of different preferences around the sizes and different things like that. And what Ezoic will do is it will learn from visitor behavior. Did this user bounce? How did advertisers bid on this person? And it will optimize around those 3 things that I mentioned at the beginning. It will look at how UX is impacting the ad rates over a long period of time, which people are terrible at. We're really bad as humans.
People don't think about the macro, do that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, we're very focused on the now.
Yeah.
So it will look at that. It'll also look at how the user experience changes. So one user with all the same attributes comes on the next day and behaves completely differently when the ad layout changes. So that would tell us maybe whether or not, we can extend a user session based on lookalike users and things along those lines. And then the last one is adjusting things like supply and demand. If I show 6 ads versus 7, do advertisers actually increase their bids because the demand on the page is lower? So can I make more money from 6 ads than 7? In some cases, yes. And in some cases, no.
I saw this. Is really cool. The less is more approach.
And sometimes you can train, like I said, all bidding is based on historical data. So you can create, and this is where looking at things over the long term make a lot of sense. I think one of the things that happens a lot of times is our users start using our platform. And one of the things our sales reps will tell people is that testing takes time. And they think it's just learning from visitors so it can maximize UX. It's doing that, but it's also training advertisers to bid more. So it may learn that every time it restricts ads, bids go up. Now, restricting the number of ads at first may actually cause the page RPM to be lower or the session revenue to be lower, but we know that maybe a week from now, we're going to basically get the revenue to jack up about 20% based on the fact that these advertisers now see the scarcity and have to adjust their bids even more. So that's one of the things the system does really well. It's that level of sophisticated ad ops that is unavailable, even if you were to hire a team of experts. And then B, it's something that, realistically, if you're an independent publisher or you're a passive investor, what you really want to do is just access every premium ad network and then the ad operations to take care of itself. And that's essentially what Ad Tester gives them the ability to do.
Yeah, such good ad tech. And I just want to highlight the macro thing here. I think it's like something that we should not skip over at all, because I create ads on different platform buying these ads. I'm a media buyer. And I've also noticed once I get out of, say, a learning period, either with Google or either with Facebook or wherever, even Twitter, once I get out of that period, the algorithm learns so much and the ad operates at a far better level. And if I don't allow the grace period to end, then like say the grace period 7 days, if I turn it off in 5 days, I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. And I could have just, missed out on a 2-day, a bit of a longer period to test this ad. And it could have been my best possible ad that I ever ran. And I feel that a lot of people, like, I don't want people to understand like, all right, cool, I'm going to go away and just plug in Ezoic and it should just work within a week, or I should just test over a month. Like, obviously continual testing is going to help you get better results. And this is going to be a hard question for you to answer, Tyler. But on average, how long would you suggest people do sort of test out a placement of different ads and things on their site before they go away and change it to optimize it and see something different?
So the answer to that is never change it and forever. So the thing is with ad placeholders, you're basically trying to
with on top of each other.
Essentially, what you want to do is you want to create you want to take away as many variables from the machines from testing as possible. So we give people the control. And this is one of the things that I think is really different and important about monetizing a site in general. Is one of the problems with outsourcing ad monetization or managing that is you immediately give away your operating interest, which is you have the longevity in mind, you have your traffic, you have your users in mind. When you outsource that stuff, people can say all the nice things they want to say, but realistically, they have one objective, and that is to make sure that tomorrow what you see makes you happy. And they know that publishers generally will leave that that's not the case. The idea behind Ezoic is in general is to make sure that anything somebody could do when you outsource it to them, you can do yourself, and it's as easy for you to be as hands-on or as hands-off as you'd like to be. And realistically, when you put placeholders on your site, you want to put as many as possible in as many locations, because Ezoic isn't going to show an ad in all of those locations. It's going to learn. And one of the things we know is that user behavior, like a good example is the pandemic. I'm willing to bet user behavior shifted a lot on a lot of sites. And so all of a sudden, it's not like you could just probably throw half the tests out the window that had been run before. And all of a sudden, it's going to have to relearn how visitors behave, how advertisers, there's just so much that's always changing that, testing is the methodology by which Ezoic is making decisions. But realistically, what's happening is the machine is learning and adapting every single day. Like the slogan or tagline that I like kind of coined for us was basically, millions of intelligent decisions every minute. And it's true. It's like our machines are changing something or fixing something or optimizing something to the tune of millions of decisions right now as we speak. We've got tens of thousands of sites using our technology, and that's a lot of decisions. Some of those sites are seeing millions of visitors a month, and it's pretty daunting when you start thinking about having to do those things manually. So it's really nice whenever you know that you can basically have something automatically doing that for you along the way, and it's never existed before.
Yeah, it is very mind-boggling, especially for somebody who's just bought a website business and it's their first website and they're like, all right, I want to get into this game of making money online. And they're like, all right, I've got to learn a whole new process of SEO. I've got to learn a whole new, especially if it's a content site. Now, the cool thing about when you get started and start learning about, how to make more money from your ads through Ezoic is it goes hand in hand with user experience. So it helps people learn a little bit more about SEO. And I'm talking about not the technical SEO, like real nitty gritty, but the overall bigger vision of what we should be striving for in SEO, which is like obviously under the big umbrella of user experience, which does decrease bounce rate, increases time on page, and all that sort of stuff. Now, I think it's a great idea for everybody that has a content site and is using ads for a monetization model to check out Ezoic And also for those who are looking at a content site and thinking, maybe I'm going to purchase a content site and put ads on it, or I own a content site and I don't have ads, maybe I'll look at how I could monetize my site through ads as well. Because I know a lot of people got hit with commissions through Amazon changing their commission structure. And some of my clients combated that by having ads on their site. So it's a de-risk monetization strategy as well. Tyler, people are going to be having so many questions about Ezoic after listening to this, and they're probably thinking like, where would be the best place to go and learn, just the basics of Ezoic? Like, is there should they be sent to a blog? Where should we be sending them and finding out more information?
It's a good question. It's a tough space to try to navigate for all the reasons we talked about early on. And I think, affiliate sites in general, we've seen them have a lot of success with a mixed model. And that's a really kind of a great fit for something like Ezoic too, from the standpoint of being able to have the control of saying like, I really don't want ads on this page because this site kills it on affiliate revenue and I just don't want to touch it. Being able to have those preferences are the types of decisions. That's why you want a platform versus being able to outsource something. And we go over quite a bit of this stuff. We have a YouTube channel. It's pretty easy to find. It's Ezoic. But we have a playlist on there called Ezoic Explains, where we kind of dive, not really from an Ezoic perspective, but just kind of an industry perspective into different things. And then on top of that, I would say in general, if this is something that you're interested in or want to dig into a little bit more, our blog is really good on Ezoic.com. We've got things categorized really well. And then in worst case scenario, if you're like, man, there's so much I don't know, and this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and I just want to kind of try to poke holes in some of the things that he said, or I am interested in connecting with him somehow so that he can give me advice on my site, you can email me at tylerbishop@ezoic.com. As you would imagine, my inbox is a nightmare.
It is CMO
now. of a very fast growing technology company. But that being said, I do have team members that actually go through my email and flag when I give out that email address messages to me. And I work diligently to go through those every day and try to find ways to respond or connect people to resources and people that can be helpful. So I'd be more than happy to connect with anyone if they're interested in learning more about Ezoic or advertising models or anything in this space that could be helpful.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. On behalf of everybody listening, we greatly appreciate you giving out your email. It will be filled up, that's for sure. Everybody that listens to this is certainly an action taker. And I'll put links to, the playlist and also the blog. I've gone through the blog. There's some great content in there. Anybody that's thinking about buying a content site or owns a content site is certainly worth checking out Ezoic. I've actually learned a little bit about them previously, but digging in deeper, I've just become a bit overwhelmed with how much you guys put into this. And I think it's a great tool. Now, for those of you who are looking at buying sites, obviously don't go away and buy a lemon. First you need to do your due diligence before you put these tools into place. I have a due diligence framework. I've updated it and I give it out to all of my clients, but I'm giving it to you guys for free. So if you want that, go to my free resources page and check out that. And there's a great explanation on how to use it. But Tyler, thank you so much for jumping on. We greatly appreciate your time and explaining Ezoic and why user experience is so important to help us increase our ad revenue. And I feel that we didn't even cover enough and we may have to do another one.
Well, I'd be more than happy to. And Jared, thanks again for having me on. I always enjoy having a chat with you. These are this subject and just buying websites and investing in web properties in general has such a close ties with our origin story. It's always something I'm interested in digging into. So I'd be more than happy to come back on in the future.
Thanks so much. Speak to you then.